very much, but I'm sure they're here in some form or another. Will anyone confess and put their hands up? Jewish Chronicle? No. They never actually own up to being here, but we shall see. We shall see. Watch the next edition closely, but don't buy it. Now, last year, with some of my colleagues, who can't be here tonight, some of them, I went to Gaza with the European campaign to end the siege of Gaza. And we saw the conditions there then. I suppose, as a doctor, before I went into Parliament, the thing that struck me most of all was the scarcity of clean water. But I mean, that is no stranger to Palestinians. I remember years ago going to the West Bank when they only had clean water through their taps once a week, and 2 miles away, in one of the Israeli settlements, they were sprinkling the lawns with water. The squandering of resources by Israel is just amazing. You have to see it with your own eyes. And a year ago, there was food, but very little food. And my medical colleagues told me there was evidence of malnutrition, particularly amongst children and the women and the pregnant and nursing mothers in particular. The schools were struggling, and as usual, because they're Palestinian children, beloved Palestinian children, they were smiling, they were laughing, they were singing songs, and they were showing us how much drive they had got to carry on in the most appalling circumstances. But one of the worst things I saw at that time was going into one of the hospitals, which were dependent on Israel deciding when they would switch the electricity on or off, incubators where children, babies, might suddenly lose the power to live. If they didn't lose the will, the power would go, and they had to depend on emergency generators if they worked. But I also, and some of you will remember me telling you about a little girl, very like my own granddaughter I left back in England, a little girl of about 3 or 4, intubated because she had a terrible chest infection. She needed to have a tube down into her lungs so that she could get oxygen, with the ventilator going, but that child was fully conscious because they'd run out of the proper painkillers to help her. And she was rolling from side to side from a bed she had to be tethered to. I don't know what happened to that little girl, but that image stuck in my mind months and months and months after I came back here. And I was kept in touch with what was going on in Gaza by a young student with a badly burnt face, as it happened, who I met, English-speaking student, who I met while I was on that visit. And when he had access to the internet, he used to send me messages and tell me what was going on. So you can imagine that what was it called? Operation Cast Lead. They choose the most brutal names for the most brutal actions. When that started a year ago, I imagined all the suffering and the misery I had seen multiplied 100 times, 200 times, 300 times. And we all know how many children were killed, how many children are still lying in the hospitals, how many children have lost limbs and lives, and there are no proper medicines, and the surgeons are struggling, and everything is in disarray. And people, if they go home, if they ever get better, are living in rubble tents on top of the rubble, if they're lucky. Now, we're going back tomorrow, some of us. In fact, I think it's 35 of us, is it? Or 35 MPs, parliamentarians. 55, thank you, 55, in advance on 55. What I would like to see is as many parliamentarians as possible going out there. I would like to see every member of Parliament, of every Parliament in the European Union, go out to Gaza and see what's happening. Then they might actually put some pressure on their government to do something.
Griffin.
Including.
But Paul, is it expensive when he goes to the EU, like some of his fascist friends in Austria?
Yeah, hang on a minute, hang on. The obscenity of Gaza is that those people have no way of escape, nowhere to go. They still do not have anywhere to go. And yet, a few minutes up the road in Jerusalem, the best hospitals in the world are operating with every facility and every drug and every bit of machinery known to man, and the Israeli people have got as much food and drink and clean water as they want. That is the obscenity of Gaza. It is not some faraway country that we don't know very much about. It is a holiday flight away from this room here. A holiday flight. It is obscene that we allow it to carry on. It is a blot on all of our consciences, however hard we're working, and I include myself in this. It is a blot on our conscience that this is allowed to go on and we're not putting more pressure on our government. So finally, I would say, remember that Israel is breaking international law, Geneva Conventions on Human Rights. We know that. Goldstone has told us, and the reason Israel will not investigate itself is because it knows it's true. That is why. We know that, and yet still nothing is done. But we in this country have a general election in the next few months. And can we just for once forget whether we're going to pay a bit more tax or a bit less tax? Forget whether we, in our lifestyle in this country, are going to suffer just a little bit more deprivation than we are now. And remember those people in Gaza and make it an issue in this general election campaign that the Israel-Palestine question has to be solved, and you will not vote for any candidate in any election unless they pledge to work towards that goal.